Joining us this week on the show are two legendary comic book creators behind titles like The Avengers, Superman Brainiac, Superman Secret Origin, Action Comics, Shazam, Batman Earth One, and Doomsday Clock. More recently, they are busy curating a brand new shared universe named Ghost Machine with other acclaimed creators like Jason Fabok, Bryan Hitch, Brad Anderson, Brad Meltzer, Peter Tomasi, and many, many more. Specifically, they are the creative force behind the glowing man Geiger and the Sunday Funnies robotic hero Junkyard Joe. It is my honor to welcome both Geoff Johns and Gary Frank onto the Oblivion Bar Podcast.
Thanks, Chris.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here. Gary, we were talking before we started recording that you don't do podcasts very often. And we actually had to get a Google Chrome onto your computer. So I appreciate you doing that. It truly means a lot to both Aaron and I.
Yeah, I'm an Apple guy, so if it doesn't run on Safari, then I don't know what I'm doing.
No, I totally get it. And we were talking before we started recording here. I was the Safari guy for a long time myself, and I had to make the switch to Google Chrome just for the extensions and whatnot. But we're not going to get into the tech savviness of it all here. We're going to talk about Ghost Machine. And let's start off the conversation talking about, the concept of Ghost Machine. Coming off the back of Doomsday Clock at DC Comics back in 2018, you two then announced Geiger at Image Comics in November of 2020. What was initially part of the Mad Ghost Productions, it would eventually coalesce into Ghost Machine at New York Comic Con last month, announcing an insane lineup that we talked about during the preview there with writers and artists joining this movement. So, Geoff, I'd love to start with you. It seems like the main goal of Ghost Machine is to put control completely into the hands of its creators. As the writer of the majority of these titles thus far, have you found it all challenging threading that creative needle throughout these different genre-based stories?
That's a big question with a lot of different parts of the answers. This all came from, just to back up a little bit, this all came from really Gary and I had done Doomsday Clock, and afterwards we really wanted to do something different. We love superheroes, but we wanted to go and do something more superhero adjacent in genre, which was Geiger. And Eric Stevenson had been talking to me for years about doing an image book. And so there's an opportunity to go do it. And we had so much fun building that world and having the control of when it shipped and the paper quality and the covers and just everything and having a character that we owned and that we could tell stories and nobody could tell us no. I love collaborating and getting feedback creatively with the people I love working with. But it was great to be in a situation where we were in control, and it does feel different. You become, as much business owners as creators at the same time, because you're creating your own books. And it grew out of that experience and other conversations with creators who wanted the same thing. They wanted control. With Doomsday Clock, we actually were supposed to ship like April 2018, I remember, and they moved us up 6 months to November 2017 because they wanted a couple of books in the year so they could make some more money in the year 2017. And that's not to say we would have been on time, because that book was a lot of work, but we lost 6 months of lead time. And it really, working on these books, it's nice to be able to create the work and then put it out when it's ready, and just have every piece of it under your purview.
It's kind of ironic that the book you guys did before creating Ghost Machine was Doomsday Clock, which I think a lot of fans, myself included, were very excited for. And we knew that it was going to be special. And like you had just spoken on, Geoff, had you guys been left to your devices to kind of curate the story the way you really truly wanted to and had the time to do it the way you wanted to, I mean, we'd be talking probably about something completely different right now. So,
well, Doomsday Clock was exactly what Gary and I wanted. It just took longer than we wanted it to take.
Right. Yeah. Well, and Gary, you've said before, and this kind of ties in, you said before that it's integral, to care about characters before seeing them overcome adversity. Was creating character-focused stories like Geiger and Junkyard Joe the most enticing perk about joining and kind of creating Ghost Machine?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Geoff and I have obviously worked together for a few decades now, and the fact is that we both, I think, enjoy doing the same thing with the stories, and we both enjoy kind of the human aspect of it, and building kind of believable characters. And you know, wherever Geoff was going or whatever he was going to be doing, I would have hoped to have been kind of, you know, attached to it in some way. But the fact that we did get that freedom to be able to just from scratch create a character and create a world and create a supporting cast and do all of those things. I mean, obviously that was perfect.
It's kind of refreshing to hear you say what you just said about whatever Geoff was doing, you were kind of hoping to be along for the ride. Cause I've always kind of assumed that you guys are like total comic BFFs outside of just the, you know, being a great creative team. It's great to hear you say that you're like, well, Geoff, what are we doing next? What's going on? Like what are we tackling next?
It's not exactly that. I mean, look, Gary and I clearly we are comic book BFFs. But we've worked together for a long time since Superman. We met on Avengers, ironically at a Marvel book. And then I knew Gary's work beforehand and was a huge fan. And then after working with him at Marvel, which I asked Tom Brevoort, hey, is Gary Frank available? And we worked together there. Then I'd ask him every, year or so, hey, do you want to do something at DC? And he was always under contract. And finally we got to go do Superman, and things just grew from there. But Gary and I always talk about, I know the reason that we work so well together and we enjoy it is because we both come from emotion and character. We always talk about, why are we going to tell the story? What's it really about? With Geiger, it started with, being a father and the struggle of trying to protect your family and children and in this crazy world. And it grew out of that. Doomsday Clock, I'll never forget, we were in England and we were walking around the Wonder Woman set for, I don't know how long it was, Gary, like an hour or 2 hours talking about the story, because it was a big responsibility. DC didn't come to us saying, hey, we want to do a Watchmen DC story. We had a story and we were only going to tell it. We were the ones that came up with it. We were the ones that said, this is why we want to do it. Watchmen's the greatest story in comics that's ever been written, but Superman's the greatest character that's ever been created in comics. That's, how does that, what does that look like? And we had a lot of things we said with that book, but everything we've ever done has always been, Gary's kind to say he just wants to go along for the ride. But the truth is it's always been a conversation about what are we going to do and why are we going to do it? And from Batman to Shazam to Superman, it's always been, why do we want to tell the story? Before we hit on Geiger, we talked about other things, and ultimately we landed on Geiger because of the core emotional concept. But I feel incredibly privileged to work with, a modern master like Gary.
If I can selfishly put myself into both Geiger and Junkyard Joe, Aaron and I, people who listen to the show know that we met while we were in the military. So Junkyard Joe automatically had that type of, we resonated with, again, especially the first issue when you were in Vietnam with Muddy, with the entire team. And then with Geiger, and I everyone listening right now, I promise I'm not trying to like trauma dump, but I went through colon cancer earlier this year, and there's a lot of cancer in Geiger. And I just felt like, meeting you guys at New York Comic Con earlier this year and truly seeing what you guys were building with Ghost Machine. I said this before we started recording, Geoff. I was on board immediately. I was like, there's something special happening here. And it shows with all the titles. But for me, I especially attached to both Geiger and Junkyard Joe.
Well, I'm glad that you got through that. That's amazing. And congratulations. Geiger is the story of survival and how you have to keep going no matter how hard the world gets or what you lose. And that's his tale, and his tale will continue in the monthly book that we're doing. And it is the story of a man that's got to find not only himself, but like some hope in the toxic, violent, kind of overwhelming world he's faced with, which I think a lot of us sometimes feel like things are so bad. How can you keep moving on? But the sun still looks beautiful when it sets. Like, there's still great stuff out there. You can't give up everything, because not everything is bad, no matter what.
Well, speaking of the glowing man, Geiger, Ground Zero #1, colors by Brad Anderson, letters by Rob Lee, came out last week and acts as a prequel to that original series from back in 2021 and a prelude to the highly anticipated Ghost Machine #1, which hits shelves on January 24th, 2024. So, Geoff, with Geiger coming back with an ongoing title in April of 2024, do you and Gary, and you have to be honest here, they always say, like, you can't pick your favorite kid, even though we all know we got our favorite somewhere. But do you and Gary have a special affinity for Tyreek and his journey in the universe compared to maybe some of the rest of the unnamed?
Well, it's hard. It's hard to, like, I mean, I love writing that character, and Gary can speak to it too. Like, the thing about Tariq and his journey and Geiger himself is, to us, he's like our cornerstone character. He's like the original character to all of it. He's the light that led the way, literally. He is, so he's really important to both of us. And the more I write him, and Gary can attest to this, he probably can see it. The more I write him, the more I love him, the more I get lost in him and get lost in who he is and what his world is and all the characters around him. And there's deeper and deeper humanity to him and deeper complexity to the supporting cast and the stories. And you don't really get to open your mind to it sometimes when you're just doing 6 issues, but knowing that we're going to just build out his world and his journey, and we know where it's going. It's super exciting to me. And I was telling Gary, I haven't enjoyed writing something like this since I was like deep in Green Lantern. And it feels really, really good to be in this universe with these characters, Geiger and the others. I'm really enjoying myself writing comics more than I have in so long. And I love writing comics, but I've been enjoying this so much. And I hopefully you'll see it on the page.
Mm-hmm. Gary, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, it's funny after we finished the first 6 issues of Geiger and we did Junkyard Joe, I was talking to Geoff about what we were going to do next, and I thought we'd kind of move on and do something else and get something else kind of moving. And I didn't. When I first finished Geiger, that kind of bleak, very. I mean, the landscape is bleak. It's a harsh place, and it's such an emotionally draining story to go through. Kind of to kind of spend 8 hours a day just immersed in that world and all of the tragedy and everything and the difficulty that the poor guy's going through. I kind of thought, that's probably me. Done now, and then we'll move on and we'll do something lighter. But coming to the end of Junkyard Joe, I kind of started to really get the urge to go back again and just kind of revisit the character again. And now, having done Ground Zero, I've just begun the first issue of the new regular series, and I'd originally said, maybe I'll do this for a while and then be happy to do something else again. But I'm kind of feeling now maybe I just want to spend a few years with this character and these people, because they're just kind of they're taking on a life of their own. And the word I always use with Geoff is richness, in that nothing's needing to be established, and it's nice to get to a point where you're kind of returning somewhere and there are all of these little things which are kind of cropping up, and there's a feeling of familiarity. So that's great. You don't kind of feel that you're needing to kind of put in the foundations for everything. It's just there, and little things crop up and you say, oh, that would work in that way, and this would work, we could bring that back in and use that again. It would just kind of starts to feel like it's kind of fleshing itself out and becoming real. So yeah, I'm kind of happy to be doing this now for a while.
Yeah, I feel like I've got a pretty long story for Geiger and the world and the characters and the supporting cast, even just in the even in Ghost Machine #1, there's a short story that introduces or spotlights a new character that's part of his world, and that character just came alive so quickly to me. And Barney, I love that 2-headed wolf. I used to call it a 2-headed dog, but Gary kept yelling at me, "It's a wolf! It's a wolf!"
I was about to say, one of my favorite moments from New York was listening to you guys go back and forth about whether Barney was a dog or a wolf.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's a wolf apparently.
Yeah.
It's established now. It's a wolf. That's canon.
It's a wolf.
Yeah, it's established.
I also love the origin that you guys gave Barney in the Geiger 80-page giant as well during
Yeah,
issue 2.
it's a nice little origin. I mean, all
Yeah.
that stuff. We're working on the TV show right now, and all that stuff is playing a role in it. But that little 8-page story in particular is fun because Barney to me has become a huge character. It says two-headed wolf, and each head has a different personality.
Mm-hmm.
One's kind of friendly and excited to like kind of make friends and the other one's really dangerous and grumpy. And so you got to be careful which one you're going to try and pet.
Now I feel like as I'm reading Geiger going forward, I'm going to try to figure out which one is which.
Oh yeah, you'll know quickly in the new books. That's for sure.
Well, I feel like it must be mentioned that Geiger, like you had just said, Geoff, that has been optioned for a television series and is currently in development by Paramount TV with Justin Simon, who did Dear White People over on Netflix.
Yeah, Justin Simon, yep.
Yep. And then you guys are both executive producing. So
Yep.
Gary, first of all, that's exciting news, right? And that's pretty amazing. And I'd love to know, with Geoff, he's had a pretty successful, career producing and show running in Hollywood. Can you discuss at all what you two plan to bring to the production team for this series?
I mean, I can, but I think it's probably going to be more Geoff's sphere of expertise. I've spent 30 years drawing pictures, and I don't know if I'm necessarily that much use in any other area. But I mean, Geoff is kind of he's kindly involved me in the the story, and it's great fun, kind of like looking in at this completely new thing. I mean, as I said, I've been in this game for a long time, and to suddenly have all of these new kind of just elements that and seeing how this thing can kind of be translated into different ways, and suddenly beginning to think in a different way beyond that kind of that format which I'm used to is it's fascinating stuff. And seeing the way that Geoff has kind of taken the story elements which were in the book and kind of tweaked things and flipped things and kind of and retooled it all for another medium is fascinating stuff to see.
Yeah, it was great to have Gary. I mean, every step of the way of writing the pilot, I would, just like Gary and I talk about comic books, like we talk incessantly about our stories, we talk about life too, and just catch up, but and Ghost Machine now, our business stuff and what we're doing with the company. But we talk a lot about our stories. And so with the pilot, when I was writing the outline, I gave it to him. When I was writing the script, I gave it to him, like just for his feedback, his notes. We'd have conversations about it, because you as you're adapting, it's pretty faithful to our book. In many respects, it's just enhanced and different, and it's a TV pilot. So, but Gary's been involved in every step of the way, and he'll continue to be.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to maybe slightly challenge your guys' mind meld. You guys have worked so well together over the years, like we've said throughout this conversation. But has there ever been a time with Geiger, or even with another series perhaps, where you guys just maybe weren't like at each other, but like possibly had a differencing in opinion when it came to a creative decision in a story?
Oh yeah, I mean we have. Here's the one thing though. I'll say this, and this is just, I take this from someone that is really smart, but they said there's no emergency in comics. And that means that comic books are comic books, right? They're fun, they're important, they matter. The creative process is vital to be clean and supported. But at the end of the day, there are certain things, like if Gary really feels strongly about something, like really strongly, it's very rarely that I will be like, look, if that means that much to you, no problem. I don't really, because it's, as long as it's we're trying to get to the same point, the path isn't narrow, it's pretty wide. You can do it a couple different ways, but there's very rarely been a place where I think we've never gotten to like kind of a head on anything ever. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, I'm like, if you feel that strongly about it, cool, no problem.
I think there's so much trust between us at this stage, and I've made suggestions in the past for things, and when Geoff has either taken them if they're a good idea, or if he doesn't want to take them, he'll explain to me why, and it always makes sense. So there's never been a moment where I've kind of felt that this is a writer kind of defending his vision for its own sake. Geoff's completely open to any other suggestions. If there's something which I come up with which may be useful, he'll use it. And if it's something which doesn't work, he'll explain to me why it won't work. So by continuing year after year with that kind of approach, it builds trust. I don't think we're going to end up arguing or having going at each other, as you said, because I think at this point we know that there's a reason for all of our decisions and all of our opinions. None of it's just digging in for its own sake. It's genuinely collaborative process.
And if I look back at all the stories we've told, from Superman and the Legion to Brainiac and Secret Origin and Batman Earth 1, Shazam, Doomsday Clock, Geiger, Junkyard Joe, I look at all those, and there's a ton of decisions and ideas that were either from Gary or myself or discussed and maybe debated about, never really argued. And I couldn't tell you. I can go back and say, we were going to do this, but we ended up doing that instead because Gary wanted to or I wanted to. I couldn't tell you because the stories just become the stories, and that's the process, right? It's like if you're driving somewhere and you take a different street, you don't really think about it too much. You just know you got to your destination and that's where you wanted to go. And that to me is what our process is. Our process is complete collaboration. Comic books are not a writer's medium. Comic books are a writer and artist medium. We are partners in it 50-50.
So I was going to say, to go back to your metaphor, I think there's a kind of a natural division there in that Geoff kind of knows where he wants to go. He knows the direction, but sometimes I might know another route to get there. So generally, I mean, broad strokes, the story, Geoff has everything in the beginning. We'll talk about it, but then sometimes I'll get a piece of script and then I'll be breaking down a page or looking at a page, and I'll say, I think I can probably make this work better if we do this instead of that. But we're arriving at the destination, the preordained destination. It's just that some way there's a technique or something, or because I'm the nature of being the artist as opposed to the writer is that I'm in it all day. 1 page is a minimum of a day to me. So my head's in it all day. Whereas Geoff will kind of will write several pages a day. So so he knows kind of where he's going, and he can take us in that direction. But sometimes when you're just kind of glued in front of a drawing board and thinking about it, sometimes another thing will suggest itself.
Yeah, and also it's a like Gary says, he's living in it, and he's actually physically living in the world. So sometimes he'll say, "Hey," even the action is like, "Hey, can you talk?" And I'll call him, and we're on Signal constantly, and we'll talk, and he's like, "Hey, I was thinking, he'd run to here instead, and we could move this thing here." I'm like, "Great," but there's times where I write a 7-panel script and it's 8 panels or it's 6, and it's never even a kind of a question. I never go, "Why'd you do that?" ever. I've never even thought that, because I know why he did it. He did it because he had an idea how to do it in a way that made more sense to him. So he did it, and that's totally great. Again, it's built on trust, and it started with, honestly, it was from that very first issue of Superman that we did for Action Comics, Superman and Legion. I'll never forget that first issue. It just clicked. It was like, boom. And I remember it came out, and it was like, I felt it. I'm like, this is a good combo. And it's because we care about the emotion of it all. Like, we love the big action stuff, but it's because we care about the emotion of it all. That's why I love, like, Junkyard Joe. I absolutely love that story. I love that that first issue. Remember, Gary was just complaining, drawing in the jungle. Remember, Gary, you're like, "Oh my God, the jungle's a reference," but he still loved it. And then we got into the winter of Melody Hills, and he was like, "I kind of miss the jungle."
Everything is like that. Everything goes that way. I hate drawing cityscapes and buildings and things like that. And so for me, the idea of doing like a natural landscape, like a jungle, I just dived into it. It was fantastic. I loved it. But then it was kind of like, you get to around 15, 18, 19 pages, and all of a sudden you're just thinking, oh, I just want to do something else.
Yeah.
Can we have a scene in a swimming pool?
Yeah. That was fun. But it's because like when we start a story, we talk about why we want to tell the story. Not because, oh, we like Batman, or we like Shazam. We were like, why are we telling this story? What's it really about? Why is it important to us? That's where Geiger came from. That's where Junkyard Joe came from. That's where Doomsday Clock came from. That's where all our works has come from, is conversations about, just about why. Like one of the things with Batman and Batman Earth 1, that it's a different kind of Batman, but one of the things I knew we wanted to get to was my grandfather was schizophrenic, and mental health is a increasingly visible issue in society in all respects. And one of the things we wanted to build was like to an Arkham asylum, and having Martha Arkham, because Martha was just Martha Wayne in the comics, and we actually made her Martha Arkham. We tied it into the Arkham family for the first time in our book, and the idea was that Bruce might have a history of some mental illness in him, but we wanted to tackle it in a very healthy way, where ultimately we build to an Arkham asylum that was a positive place, and along the way, the struggles that someone would go through to deal with losing their parents and pushing themselves to the physical brink, and dealing with a father figure who is kind of, distant the way our Alfred was, or at least tough and not very emotional, and ending up being more emotional. Like everything we talk about, everything every story we do, we talk about the why and the where it comes from, and that's what makes them work for us. That's why we can work together, because it's not about, oh, look, let's have, as much as we love the Hulk fight the Thing, we would love doing that, but we'd have a good reason for it.
Yeah. Well, and, kind of speaking on collaborations, I think we should take a moment to really highlight Brad Anderson and Rob Lee for coloring and lettering basically every single issue of the Ghost Machine titles. These two are two of the best in the business, and it really shows, once again, the talent you guys have on display with Ghost Machine. And Gary, I'd love to pick your brain on this in terms of collaboration with, the larger universe, with these other very talented, well-established artists, along with Geoff and Brad and Rob. Has it changed your creative process at all with Geiger and Junkyard Joe, working with all of these different, collaborators?
There's a feeling, particularly with Brad, of kind of like of working with a safety net. I know that at this point, we've worked together for so long. I kind of have a rough idea of what he's going to do, and sometimes he'll surprise me, but it's always a good surprise. There's never any trepidation when the colors come in. I'll find something maybe once in a while. I'll say, well, I just intended this to be like that, and it's something, and maybe I should have written a color note, but I just didn't think. But in terms of I know that there's never going to be a thing which makes me unhappy, where I'm going to look at it later and say, oh, I really wish you'd gone down this road, because much as with the relationship between Geoff and myself, there's a degree of trust now. It's just nice when the files come through and I get to look through the colors. In fact, sometimes the little things, which may be like a kind of a story related thing, I don't even notice it like on the first pass. I'll notice it like 3 days later when I'm going back for like the 50th time, just kind of drooling over the colors. I'll say, oh, that was like, I don't know, just something which should have matched up with something else or something, but just it's never there's never any trepidation, there's never any worry. I just kind of just enjoy it, and I'm always just blown away when the moment I open those files. I know it's just going to be a treat.
I agree. Like Brad is, I call him the master of light, because he's got this uncanny ability and talent to to have Geiger literally glow off the page. I don't know how he does it, even on the printed page. When I see it on the computer screen, it's so bright, but then on the printed page, it still is. And, Andy's, again, like everybody else, like Rob Lee, such a great human being, which is why, they're a part of Ghost Machine. But Brad is a painter. Like he's just an amazing artist himself. And I brought up Rob. I'd like to talk about Rob Lee too. Rob is best letter in the business. He crushes it every time, and he doesn't just letter a book. There's an artistry to it that is unquantifiable, and also there's a level of thought that goes into everything he does. He will put notes into the margins about certain books, and or dialogue or moments in the book to consider, and he's an active participant in making the book better. And
he's great. I actually did those little red notes in the margin. I always check now before I say something, because if I've got an opinion, I find so often Rob's on the same page, and I look and I see that Rob's made a kind of note to the same effect in the margin.
Yeah, it's so good. He's so good, and he cares so much about the books too. And and it's important to have an entire creative team. And then our editor, Brian Cunningham, too. I don't want to, I could talk about our whole team, but Brian Cunningham is just a killer editor, always thinking, always on point, always cares about quality, always gives you great thoughts, great notes, great motivation. Steve Blackwell designs the whole thing. Like, we have an amazing team on this book and in Ghost Machine overall. Everybody a part of Ghost Machine 2, we could go down a list from creators to our team. But yeah, we're very lucky. We want to create simply the highest quality books on the stands, the best writing, the best art, the best package, best paper. Like, we want to do everything to make these things worth people's time and money, and worth, the characters deserve it. These are good characters. And really, Ghost Machine is about that, by the way. It's about characters as much as it is creators. Like, our books are the characters. Geiger and Redcoat and Rook and the Rockefellers and everybody else. Our books are about the characters, with the characters, front and center, and great characters you'll follow anywhere. And Geiger, that's why I'm with Geiger. Like, writing him monthly is such a treat, because I love that character. He's so intriguing to me. It's just this guy who's lost himself and is overly violent, and yet very considerate, kind, and there's a great paradox within him that I find really fun to work with.
Well, we've talked about it many a times, even before the recording, that I'm totally drinking the Kool-Aid. So everything you're talking about, Geoff, you got me. I've been in the medium since I was a kid, and I feel like I can see through certain events or facades, especially with the big two, when things are happening. I'm like, oh well, that seems like it's a marketing push or something. And we talked about it. The moment I heard about, or when I heard you guys talk about Ghost Machine as a company, as a product, I was in. And again, I want to kind of take a step back too. Gary, I heard that you were actually the one who came up with the name Ghost Machine. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Well, yeah, we kind of, there were like a few things that we were, and like machine ghosts and things like that, and we had kind of like a few different things which kind of we went through like a load of stuff. I don't know. I think, was it me? I think it probably
it was you, Gary. And one of the things we talked about, you hit on it one day, and it was just like, oh, that sounds so cool. And also, it's got a meaning to us. The ghost in the machine is a phrase from the late 40s, from a French philosopher who talked about the ghost in the machine being the spirit in the body, and it evolved over the years to being the program in a computer that doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and the programmer can't explain why. So it's kind of this magic, unquantifiable spirit and passion that you can't explain. And the ghost in the machine goes into these machines. And we always, I think, saw ourselves as flipping the paradigm of most of these companies out there are editorial structures, right? They're business structures and editorial structures that then hire the talent, and they bring in the talent, and they are in control. And we flipped that paradigm upside down. So the ghost is in charge of the machine. And it makes and I think it makes it really exciting for us to forge new ground, because it's strange that nothing like this. It seems simple, and it seems like, oh yeah, we've seen like creators strike on their own before, but you've never seen anything where creators actually unite and co-own everything that they create together before and operate the company. You know, we don't just co-own it, we operate it, we run it. And that's exciting because we can make it the best we can possibly make it. You know, I visited Sideshow Collectibles this week, and it was such an amazing place to be. They built such a wonderful culture on top of their amazing products and the people there. And it was an inspiration. It's like, it can be done. It's privately owned. Like, it can be done when you're not answering to corporate, Wall Street. Like, you don't have to answer to these faceless people that don't really understand what you do or why you do it or why you love it. And everyone we work with understands why we do it, because they love to do it and they have the passion for it. And it's just made it a really, Ghost Machine means something much more to me now than I even thought it would be 6 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in.
Sorry,
go ahead, Gary. Go ahead.
I was just going to say how the thing has kind of evolved from that one book and kind of like all of the layers, and then weirdly, like this year, with the strikes and stuff in Hollywood, it kind of underlines how that kind of model of almost an adversarial system, where you've got kind of a studio and creatives, and they're kind of like fighting over how much of the pie they can keep and deny the other one, and the whole thing just kind of grinds to a halt for like half a year. It just makes no sense. And if you have a situation where everybody's kind of pulling in the same direction, where the creatives are kind of, there's not a line, there's not a distinction between the creative people in the company and the business itself and the people that are running the business, then everybody's pulling in the same direction. There's no wasted energy.
Before I let you guys go, I wanted to cap in the conversation and just totally e-break out of Ghost Machine for a quick moment by revealing an insane discovery that I came across yesterday while reading this little book right here, The Reign of Marvel Studios, MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios. In chapter 2, it's revealed back in 1994 while working as interns at Donner Schuler Donner Productions. Geoff, you and Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige were junior staffers together, and at the same time. And you guys, at one point, I think he like drove your car to San Diego Comic-Con. How did I not know this?
Yeah, we went the first San Diego. I think it was '96. The first San Diego Comic-Con I ever went to. I always wanted to go, was with Kevin. Kevin and I took, I forget what kind, I think I was driving like a Grand Am. They don't even make them anymore. A Grand Am, or I think that's what I had. And we drove down to San Diego, our first Comic-Con together. It was super fun.
Yeah.
We had a great time. He was working on X-Men when it was just started. I remember one of the first weeks I was there, the X-Men script was there and I couldn't wait to read it. And it was an old version. They didn't end up using the version. It was rewritten because the one I read had Iceman in it. But he's always been a comic fan. He used to have this shed on on the roof of his apartment building. He kept all his toys. It was so funny. But he's the real deal. Kevin's a great guy, and he's brilliant, obviously.
Yeah.
But we went to our first Comic-Con together.
I wanted to pick your brain on that a little bit because I was just, of course, I'm listening to the book on Audible, and I'm at work, and all of a sudden your name, I knew we were going to be talking, and your name just popped in. I was like, oh my God, how did I not know this little piece of comic history? But yeah, just truly incredible. Small world.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, Geoff, Gary, thank you both so much for being here today on the Oblivion Bar podcast. I want to pass the baton off to each of you individually really quick before we go. Is there anything you want to highlight or plug before we let you go?
I mean, just that, we're Ghost Machine #1 comes out January 24th. It's going to introduce all our launch titles and characters and creators. There's some surprises coming up for artists that haven't yet been announced, and some titles, and we're really excited about it. And then we launch our books in earnest in April. So Ghost Machine #1 January 24th. And Geiger Ground Zero #1 is out now. #2 is out next month, and that will get you up to speed. And if you read those and you're interested, there's a trade paperback for Geiger and one for a character called Junkyard Joe that we talked about that's in there. But other than that, you can just jump right on board. This is I think one of the things that I'm so excited about. This is a brand new start. So you can just come on now and meet these characters and get on the train.
Mm-hmm. Gary?
Exactly the same. I'm gonna just plug the same stuff because that's what we're doing.
Well, I will say ghostmachinepro.com is a good way for a lot of listeners to check out. That'll have all your socials, your guys' kind of like your timeline going forward. Take it from me. If for some reason you can't trust Geoff Johns and Gary Frank, take it from Chris that you need to be paying attention to Ghost Machine, Geiger, Junkyard Joe, Rockefellers, Red Coats. All of it's really truly exciting, and I'm very appreciative that you two both came on today to talk about all of it.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks,
Thanks, Gary.